What's going on, guys? I'm a regular guy at the Regular Guy Firearms channel. Thanks for watching. Okay, so here it is, right? We're going to talk about certain advantages and disadvantages of various different pistol sights. Okay, before I go into, certain advantages and disadvantages, we typically have three different types. Okay, now the vast majority of the pistol sights that you're going to end up running into are your notch and post type sights, where all it is it is a solid notch and a notch, an open notch, and a solid post in the center. Okay, very typical of stuff like AK iron sights, which are very similar in how they're used and everything else, almost identical. And within those, you have your really common variety of notch and post type sights, where there are three dots, one on both sets of the notches and on the post itself. And then you have your lesser common sights, your V-notch and dot or dot the eye type sights and stuff like that. And you see that in sight setups like XS big dots. Now, getting into that, there are certain variations of this. With your notch and post variety of sights, generally speaking, you're looking at stuff like 3-dot type setups, and you see them in Trijicon HDs. You see them in a lot of stock guns, like the stock iron sights that come out of M&Ps and stuff like that. You end up seeing them in a very wide variety of like Meprolite and stuff like that too. So with all of that being said, here's the deal, right? You have your daylight, your night sights, and then your variation of the two, and I'll get into those in a second. Okay, your daylight or target sights usually have a flat black rear and a flat black front sight setup. Now, these are used by a lot of different guys to shoot very precisely, and oddly enough, what's funny is that the difference between the flat black rear and flat black front is that they work in exactly the same way as the 3-dot sight setups do. And a lot of people get this misconception that when you're lining up those sights and whatnot, and you see the 3 different dots, you're supposed to get basically equal height between the 3, equal light between the 3, meaning just even space, make all of them even with each other. And then in order to take a precise shot, a lot of guys will use the dot itself on the front sight post to take the precise shot. That's actually not the case. The dots exist to speed up your acquisition of the sights and whatnot, but they work in the same way that the target sights do, because when it comes to how you're actually using them, if you're trying to take a precise shot, what you're holding on, or what it is that you're actually putting on the target, trying to cut in half and actually press the trigger on to be precise, is the very top of those front sight posts. Basically the very top edge. Okay? Right in here, right at the very top, that's where you're shooting or putting on the target. So if you were to cut a circle in half, the very leading edge is what you're using. Now, the advantages to 3-dot setups are that, well, they do actually speed you up a little bit and get you on target a little bit faster. Generally speaking, sights that have this type of setup have their rear sights a little bit wider away from the front sights. And seeing that pistols are closer range guns, having a little bit less clutter when you're snapping that gun up on target will speed you up a little bit. Okay, so that is an advantage to those, is that, these guys, or the flat black sights, tend to be very precise. The 3-dot sight setups tend to be a little bit faster, retaining the ability to be as accurate as the flat black target setups, but only if you use them properly. Make sense? And only reason why I say that is because if you're using the dot instead of the very top of the front sight post, you're actually holding a little bit high. Okay? Now, with that being said, you also have your XS sights, and there are other sight setups that are very similar to it, but your XS big dots, or whether or not you have the standard or the big dot, is irrelevant. The point is that your XS sight setups do not have the same arrangement, meaning yes, you can line up the rear or the front, but realistically speaking, all you're trying to do is keep your front sight post or your front dot in the center of the wedge, which can be a little bit more difficult to wave off left and right. But they're set to be fighting pistol sights or combat sights to where you are supposed to speed up quite a bit faster when you're shooting with these things. And you're supposed to be able to acquire them super fast and get on target and whatnot. Now, what's kind of funny is that with the individual dots, right? Now, what's funny, and if you actually read this on the XS Sight package, you're putting the dot, and this is what the dot looks like, basically in the center of the wedge, or you're dotting the eye, right, with that dot. And the way that those sights are actually designed is to where inside of 15 yards, you're using the center of the dot itself to put on that target. And farther away, meaning plus 15 yards, you're using the crest of the dot or the very top as your reference point. Okay, so just the way that those are specifically designed for that type of shooting and whatnot for a specific type of practice. And I suspect that the reason for the different holds is a little bit variance as far as the height and whatnot, because the size of the dot itself is larger. But, you know, you would have to ask XS themselves why it is that they put those directions on the packages. I don't know. But the advantage to a set of XS sights, really, and you can look up the review that I did on them, I actually really like them, is that you are able to be much faster because you don't have your rear sight notch cluttering your vision at all. All you're doing is dotting the eye with this big huge dot, and you're pressing a trigger. And you still retain the ability to be pretty accurate with them as well. But this is a training issue, and it's something that you will have to get used to. You know, I've pulled off shots that were pretty far with them and whatnot on, you know, smaller and bigger pistols. There are other dudes out there that have pulled off pretty long shots with XS big dots, so which is why I laugh, because when people call XS sights inaccurate, I just call them retarded, because they don't know how to use a sighting system. That's all that is. Now, within this, you have yet another variation on sight setups, because we have the target sights, we have the 3-dot sights, and then we have, you know, your XS variety, or similar to. Now we're going to go into basically the differences between target sights, or flat black sights, 3-dot sights, and one more variation with regards to day and night shooting, because you still have your target sights, your night 3-dot sights, your XS sights, which generally speaking are night sights also, like meaning there's little tritium vials in them that make them glow in the dark. And you also have your target illuminated setup, which is like a set of these, where you have a fiber optic front up front, and then a flat black in the rear. I still generally consider these target sights, but they're a little more enhanced because they are illuminated via the fiber optic cable that collects light up front. Now, with all that being said, right? Well, what's the advantage as far as carrying a gun with those setups on a daily basis? Okay, the target sight setups, honestly, the biggest advantage is that they're cheaper for the most part, and the sight alignment sight picture is exactly the same day or night, and that's how it is for all of these pistols. But the sight picture itself is the same if you carry a gun light on your pistol. Okay, whether or not you have a handheld or you have a light on your pistol, the sight picture is exactly the same. Okay, with a set of tritium in 3-dot sights and whatnot that are set of notch and post, there's an advantage to that. You have a rear sight reference, and it's a little bit easier to pick up, but they can get a little, what's the word, slow or confusing, actually. Because I've seen in classes before where we're shooting in the dark where dudes have same brightness and same color dots, and they would just be shooting perfect during a set of drills, and then a drill or two here or there were under a real tight time crunch, and for whatever reason their bullets were like way off the paper or barely on the shoulder when they're shooting for the heart and that type of stuff. And the reason for that is that dudes in certain circumstances end up misaligning those dots, where they think that this dot is their center dot and this dot is their rear sight right. Okay. Now, there's going to be dudes that jump in the comments and say, oh, well, this is absolutely preposterous. I've never done that before. Well, then no one's run you real hard in the dark, because it happens, and it happens way more often than you'd think. So that's actually a disadvantage to a 3-dot setup as far as using tritium vials and whatnot in them with regards to running the same color and brightness. Now, there are guys that get dimmer rear, brighter front, but I've still seen those issues before too. So if you're going to run this sight setup, I would highly suggest like an amber rear, green front, so that there is a definite difference between the two, as far as, okay, those are definitely different colors, and you can basically keep those sights aligned properly the whole time. Now, with the XS sight setups, and what's funny is that I'm going to put the Heine Straight 8 sights in this category too, because they are still a set of notch and post sights. The only difference is that in the rear, at the base of the rear sight, for instance, there is a dot at the base of the rear rather than on either of the wings. So all you're looking for is a pair of straight 8s, you know, 1 dot, 2nd dot. If you can only pick up 1 dot, you're nose diving your pistol lifted up so you can pick up the other dot. And generally speaking, these guys would do an amber rear and a green front, something like that, so that dudes don't mix stuff up ever, you know. So I keep those two in the same category because all it is an inline sighting setup for tritium, which I think is great because the whole misaligning thing generally never happens with those particular pistols now. Pistol sights now. Okay. The big disadvantage to these sight setups is also for guys that either run a white light as just a regular handheld white light or a white light on their guns, is that the tritium itself, the glowing part, washes out under light. So the problem is that if there's ambient light, like street light and stuff like that, and you turn on that pistol light, those dots wash. They're done. And the only instances where I've seen the tritium vials and whatnot still remain noticeable is when it's like pitch black darkness and the only available light is what's shooting out of your gun or out of your hand. Then, because all of that light is forward, you pick up those sights easier. So that's actually kind of a problem to me. However, for those of you that choose to run just those sight setups, what's neat about that is, generally speaking, a lot of us don't walk around in pitch black environments. There's street lights and stuff all over the place. And when you just pull out that pistol or whatever, with that ambient light, you pick them up really well still. So it's a pretty good solution even for guys that don't carry handhelds and stuff like that, even though I think you should. But still an option, still a valid option. It's been going on for a long time and it works really well. Now, here's the next set. And this is something that I've been turned on to more and more lately. I used to use them when I was more on the competitive scene, but now I'm starting to revert back to them now that I've taken a long enough break away from them because I've been on the XS sauce for a while. Now, this is a set of Amerigo Sights, okay? And as you can see, it is a black rear and a red front. The front is actually a fiber optic cable. Now, the fiber optic cable itself is what gathers light into it, and it's what basically causes the glow and whatnot, right? And what's great about this is that even in pitch black darkness, when you tick on this light, the fiber optic cable will gather it and bring it into that sighting system, which is real neat. Now, there is a definite con to this, and people will bring it up, and that is, well, what if the fiber optic cable is broken? This is a valid concern. However, the chances of that fiber optic cable being broken are kind of minimal if you run a quality holster. Okay, I understand that guys will treat their concealed carry pistols as also like their duty pistol when they're going to other classes, running carbines and switching over between one and the other. Stuff gets in those Safariland holsters and whatnot, and yeah, you can have a breakage at some point. Or I've seen it to where fiber optic cables of lesser quality, or where the sight itself will not be hanging on real tight to the fiber optic cables, to where the cables themselves will start to back out and then one day just fly out, right? Well, first and foremost, when you end up with those sighting systems, you get a big string of fiber optic cable that's usually with it, and you can cut them and get back into them. Inside of the Amerigo package here, there's another cable that you can replace that with just in case. But if it happens on the fly, you still have what was holding it in place to shoot through. You know, I'm not going to say that that's the easiest thing in the world, and I'm not going to say it's 100% bomb-proof, but then again, none of these are, because as you've heard, there are advantages and disadvantages to this. So, even with all that being said, you know, it still works, and it still works pretty well. It's real fast. You can still use the same principle from the target sight setup, to where the very leading edge you can still use and all other stuff. But with the big freaking glowing red thing up front, you snap on targets really fast with it. And another big advantage to that, honestly, is for guys that use rifles and stuff like that and put red dots on their guns. For me, that is a big consistency thing, because what I'm constantly using to shoot things is a little red dot out front. Does that make sense? So, I hope you guys found this a little bit helpful. It was just a short, variation of what's out there for the most part. The pros and the cons and all this other stuff. And if you found it helpful, go ahead and shoot that in the comments box below. If you have questions, again, do the same. And if not, oh well. It kind of sucks that you just wasted 17 minutes of your life. But with that being said, guys, remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy. By the way, Russian roulette clothing is good to go.